All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Hunter. I'm a post-bac student at Portland State University. I was once a Principles of Biology student myself, and I am here to take you through a review of the Week 4 material, which is covering circulation. So we've moved away from plants a little bit into the animal kingdom, which is exciting for me. Good evening. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. If you want to answer any problems as we're working through them, please put that in the chat. You should have access to these worksheets now. As I understand it, your instructors sent out an email with a link to the Google Drive that has all of the documents and submission folders that you need. And I will be grading things for completion. No attendance is taken. You can find recordings of these on the PSU Learning Center YouTube channel. I think that's all the admin stuff I have to go over. How's everybody doing tonight? We've got a few new faces in here, it looks like. Give me a thumbs up so I know you can hear me. Doing good. Awesome. Okay, at least one of you can hear me, which is fantastic news. All right. So I know some folks have midterms coming up. I certainly do. So we're going to be relatively focused going through the material tonight. I love to hang out after the streams normally and talk study habits and life hacks and stuff, but we probably don't have time for that tonight. So let's get into it. Diagram and describe. The path a red blood cell takes from a capillary in your big toe to your heart and back to your big toe. At each point in the pathway, indicate whether the red blood cell is most likely picking up or losing oxygen. Indicate also the relative blood pressure that part of the path is likely to have. Include all of the following terms in your diagram. We could spend the whole hour here, and it would be worthwhile, truly. And we'll have some opportunities to review as we're going here. I'm going to attempt, come on now. There. So we're handed a partial diagram here, which is helpful, but we can flesh this out. I'm going to start on the right here because it's a little bit, but oh my goodness. I apologize if we have a couple glitches. All right. So up top here, I'm going to go top to bottom, even though it's said to start, from the toes, which I guess would be down here. Come on. All right. The pen's not doing it. We're sticking to the mouse. Okay. So up top here, we've got our pulmonary circuit. These are our lungs, right? We've got our heart represented here, and we have our capillary networks. And these capillaries can be representative of the rest of the body. Anything other than a major vein going back to the heart or an artery going to the rest of the body can be perfused by these capillaries. So we've also got this nicely color-coded here. We have blue here indicates oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood enters one side of the heart, enters the pulmonary circuit where it goes to the lungs, where it's oxygenated. It literally turns red if you wear a heart rate monitor on your wrist. This is how it tells what your blood oxygen saturation is. That oxygenated enters the atrium of the heart, out the left ventricle to the rest of the network. So let's label some stuff here. Is not letting me type the way that I was hoping it would. All right. Give me two seconds, gang. Pop any questions you have in the chat while I try and fix All right, we're going back to the. All right. Excellent. Cool. Now we can just draw on it like we normally do. Okay. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Moving on. We've got our lungs. We've got veins. We've got our capillary network. We have arteries. Trying to monitor the chat and do this. Up here we've got the pulmonary circuit. This is our, come on. Yeah. We'll be more specific. Pulmonary vein. Okay. When we're looking at these diagrams, and if you ever start working on patients, you're always using the patient's orientation. And so when I'm looking at this diagram, this is right, and this is left. I hope that helps get ahead of some confusion here, because this was terrifyingly disorienting for me. So when blood enters the heart, we go this, actually. I have a heart right here that I can draw on. Blood enters the circuit here on the right side of the heart. This is your right atrium. Again, we can label that here as well. Enters the pulmonary circuit. That's our pulmonary artery here. Yes. Blood comes back around through the pulmonary vein back to the heart. Which is occluded here, but I'm pretty sure it's this one. Into the right atrium. And out the right ventricle to the aorta, and then the rest of the body. That was a lot of talking. But one more time just to review. Vena cava into the right atrium of the heart, into the right ventricle of the heart, where it goes to the pulmonary circuit, out to the lungs. Oxygenated blood comes back around in the pulmonary vein, V is towards the heart, into, the right atrium, out the right, left. Told you I'd get confused. Out the left ventricle to the aorta and the rest of the body. This is a good thing to have memorized. And I've had many opportunities to review it, and I still get my right and left wrong. And we'll be okay. I like this diagram on our right because it's color-coded and because it gives you that sense of where the blood is coming from and where it is going simply by that system. So the big ones, venules, would be these small ones. Venule is just a smaller vein. And similarly, we have arterioles. Yeah. What am I forgetting? We kind of touched aorta. Aorta is the big one coming from the heart to the rest of the body. Coronary arteries are those arteries supplying the heart. So coronary is a good word to know, just means related to the heart. Arteries are supplying vasculature. So coronary arteries supply the heart with the blood that it needs to function. And I guess that would be these. I'm going to try purple. Would be. Do I have a better diagram? Not really. There are smaller. Giving the heart a hug. What's the difference between arteries and veins and capillaries? I'm so glad you asked. Yes. From the heart. A is away. Arteries go away. And veins are coming back in. Capillaries are much, much smaller networks of vasculature. So capillaries are, if you've ever, there are a lot of traumatic injuries that can result in what we would call like a burst blood vessel that might result in bruising or something like that. So that's damage to the capillary network very often. And they're just very, very, very tiny tubes in your body through which blood can perfuse the tissue. You're going to hear this word perfusion a lot, and a lot of people use it interchangeably to mean getting blood into places, but what we're actually talking about is getting those necessary nutrients to the tissues that need it. And so this circulation is important in humans because it's carrying oxygenated blood throughout the body and it's taking waste products out of the blood, out of the rest of the body, back towards the heart and other organs, where it can get cleaned out, reoxygenated in the lungs, and then redistributed throughout the body. Perfusion is simply the diffusion of those nutrients across membranes. We're going to be able to get into that a little bit deeper at a later question I've just remembered. Yeah, veins and arteries are big pipes. It's helpful to think about this in terms of pumps and pipes. The heart is the pump, and the veins and arteries are just the pipes to and from that pump, in simplest terms. So, this is actually covered in the next questions. A fantastic follow-up. Or you're sheet ahead of me, which is also a smart thing to do. The degree of musculature differs in these chambers of the heart: atria, right ventricle, and left ventricle. Draw the heart and its chambers, including differences in the musculature. And again, they've given us a little diagram here, which is sort of helpful. But what I want to highlight here, this shaded portion is what we're looking at. So this denotes the thickness of the digit. So you can see in our atria is the word for like an entryway. So if you can just happen to know what that means, then you're in business. Right ventricle. What you'll notice here, there's a lot more acknowledging that they're fairly thin on both sides, but I'm going to do a different color again. Also on the left side, the atrium. In both cases, blood's coming into the heart. It doesn't have to do a whole lot of work to get the blood there, necessarily. It's working with negative pressure. But it then has to push that blood somewhere else. And so in both cases, right here, in our right ventricle, which again goes towards our pulmonary, which goes to a high volume of blood. It has a long way to go. The heart has to create a lot more pressure to get that blood where it needs to go. The muscle is more developed in those areas for that reason. So let me make sure I hit on all my important points here. So the walls of the atria, both right and left, are fairly thin, indicating very little musculature. Blood flows through the atria into the ventricles. When the atria contract, they push blood, they contain only a few centimeters into the ventricles. This overfills the ventricles and helps initiate the ventricular contraction. The right ventricle pumps its contents to the lungs, and the left ventricle pumps its contents out the aorta to the rest of the body. The difference in musculature of the two ventricles is correlated with the amount of effort required to move the blood through the circulatory pathway associated with each ventricle. So this is, again, the form is informed by the function that it needs to achieve. That was a whole lot of talking. Does anyone want me to actually type that out here? I'll try and summarize. That's thin. We're really fighting the technology. There we go. Cool. So that explains the difference in why differences in musculature might exist by explaining the normal functions of each chamber. That's a sufficient summary for now. Include in your description the functions of the SA node, the pacemaker, the AV node, and the AV and semilunar valves. All right. Cool. The signal from the SA node, also called the pacemaker, triggers the contraction of the atria. Atria, again, is receiving the blood. So blood's in the atria, SA node triggers contraction of the atrium, pushes blood into the ventricle. This signal, the SA signal, is delayed at the AV node, which allows the atria to empty before the ventricles are signaled to contract. Why might it be a problem if there isn't sufficient delay between the SA node and the AV node? And I'm going to type while you guys ponder that. Would the heart have too much blood? Why would having too much blood in the heart be a problem? You're on the right track. If the heart's job is to get blood throughout the body, and it's hanging out in one place, it's not where it needs to be, in simple terms, right? So the delay in signals is just allowing the ventricle to fully empty into, allowing the atrium to fully empty into the ventricle, so that when the next contraction comes in the AV circuit, it's able to go to the next place. Too much blood in the heart would make the muscle swell, and then it can't contract. Electrical pulses won't act. Yeah, it's not really the fact of the blood being, well, yes, blood being in the heart is bad. Mainly because it's not going where it's needed, and new blood can't get into that space. So, yeah. Cause the muscle swell, can't contract, electrical pulses won't act. So I'm going to get a little off track if we go down this rabbit hole, because we have two different issues that you're describing. One is pressure related, one is electrical, right? And that's kind of what this question is about. Exactly. Yeah. You're basically creating a stoppage. You can't push blood out the other side. So the AV valves lie between the atria and the ventricles. These are one-way valves that prevent blood going when the ventricles. So backflow is also bad. The semilunar valves lie between the left ventricle and the aorta. So the left ventricle, again, is here, and the aorta is kind of tucked behind. The semilunar valves lie between the left ventricle and the aorta, and between the right ventricle and the pulmonary circuit. So this little membrane is the valve. These are the semilunar valves. Cool. All of these are one-way valves to prevent blood backflow. Blood going the wrong way would also be bad. So far, so good? We're already 27 minutes into this broadcast, and we have covered a lot. This is important, especially if you get into any kind of role working on humans, anything veterinary. It's all good to know. And if not, just understanding how nutrients get throughout your body. All right, question 3. While in utero, the wall between the two atria of the human fetal heart is not complete. An opening, the foramen ovale, allows blood from the two atria to mix. Normally at birth, this hole seals over and the two atria are separated from each other. What would be the consequences to the infant if this hole did not seal over at birth? I'm going to scroll back up. So we're talking about right atrium to left atrium. There's membrane and muscle between them, but that doesn't form until after the infant is born. What would happen if that space was just left open? We were kind of alluding to this already. Wouldn't the blood not be able to get oxygenated or flows in at all? Yeah, if the foramen ovale did not seal at birth, oxygenated blood from the lungs in the left atrium would mix with deoxygenated blood from the right atrium from the rest of the body. And this condition is called blue baby syndrome because your baby turns blue. The blood going to the body carries less oxygen than normal, and as a result, the baby turns blue during times of higher metabolic activity, which require greater amounts of oxygen input per unit time. So, I swear I can type. Yeah. So if you've ever seen someone go into shock or just be scared, they talk about that paling of the face. A more extreme version of that is what we're describing right here. Blood's not going to the rest of the body. Oxygenated blood isn't getting to the rest of the body. But here it's because of a physical deformity where there is now between that space of oxygenated blood into the left ventricle, which goes to the rest of the body. Or before left ventricle. Yeah. It is treatable. Needs surgery. I think that's actually a later question. All right. Question 4. One of the most common congenital defects of the cardiovascular system is called transposition of the great arteries. Haha. Yes. In infants who have this defect, the pulmonary artery exits from the heart where the aorta should, and the aorta exits where the pulmonary artery should. All other circulatory connections are normal. Diagram and describe the circulation of blood in an infant who has this genetic defect. All right. I'm going to begrudgingly pick up the pen again. But this is kind of cool. So, transposition of the great arteries. An infant who has this defect, the pulmonary artery exits from the heart where the aorta should. Actually, I'm going to color this helpful for my brain. So we got left vent would normally go left atrium, left vent, to the body, from the aorta. Yeah, so the difference here is different. We're going to try purple. The pulmonary artery, this one. The pulmonary artery exits from the heart where the aorta should. Okay? And the aorta exits where the pulmonary artery should. All other circulatory connections are normal. So instead, we've got here and here. So then our flow of blood is in the right atrium, oxygenated at this point. Hang on. When the positions of the aorta and pulmonary artery are reversed, two separate circulatory systems are set up. Yeah. Okay, yeah. One pumps the blood from the left side of the heart via the pulmonary artery to the lungs and back. Yeah, okay, that sounds normal. Via the pulmonary vein to the left side of the heart. The other pumps the blood from the right side of the heart via the aorta to the body and back. From the right side of the heart. Week, yeah, flows will be different. Two separate circulatory systems are set up. One pumps the blood from the left side of the heart. Yeah. We're going to rest coronary circuit and back to the right atrium. The other pumps the blood from the right side of the heart via the aorta. Okay. To the body. Back to the right side of the heart. What type of treatment would such an infant? I'm going to type this out so you guys have it. Okay. What type of treatment would such an infant need? Unless something's done immediately, the infant's going to die. Blood isn't going where it needs to go. So an operation to reverse the arteries takes a relatively long time. But in the short term, physicians can open the foramen ovale to allow at least some oxygen to be pumped to the body. So in the previous case where that opening in the foramen ovale was causing problems, it's now the solution to the problem of having our pumps crossed, or our pipes crossed. Cool. Get my own circulation. All right. So how are heart and lung structure and function related to metabolic rate? Describe the simplest type of closed circulatory system, included the function of each part of the system, and explain how the structure of each part is related to its function. The simplest closed circulatory system would be your heart, right? Heart, which is your pump, pipes, veins, and arteries. The arteries branch into arterioles and capillaries, where that exchange occurs, and from the capillaries, blood continues on to venules and then veins back to the heart. Arteries are more muscular than veins to withstand the higher blood pressure resulting from the force of the heart's contraction. And capillaries are one cell wall thick, really, really thin, facilitates diffusion really, really easily. So, 2 chambers at least. 1 atrium, 1 ventricle. Yeah. Cool. To stand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so arteries are more muscular than veins, and again, it's to withstand that pressure. If you ever get to see them in dissection, super, super cool. All right. If you want to increase the rate of metabolism in an organism, you need to increase A, the rate of food and oxygen delivery to the cells or the body, and B, the rate of removal of waste products from the cells or the body. In the evolution of vertebrates, what modifications of the circulatory system and or circulatory function have occurred to increase metabolic rate? I mentioned 2-chambered hearts earlier. How many chambers does a human heart have? We've been talking about it all afternoon. More chambers, more efficient movement through the pump, more precise movement throughout the pump. So fish have a two-chambered heart, 1 atrium, 1 ventricle. Deoxygenated blood is pumped from the heart to the gills, and oxygenated blood then travels from the gills to the rest of the body. Blood pressure is fairly high as the blood leaves the heart. However, as the arteries branch to form arterioles, and as the arterioles branch into capillaries, the cross-sectional area becomes so great that the blood pressure is reduced to basically zero. And as a result, the blood flow from the gills to the rest of the body is relatively slow, even when aided by that muscular contraction of the body wall. So we're kind of going towards more and more complex organisms here and more efficient metabolism. And you can see it all in the structure of this one organ. Yeah, 4 chambers in total. The right atrium and ventricle is 2 chambers, and then the left atrium and ventricle, receiving blood from the lungs and sending it to the rest of the body through the aorta, is 2 chambers. Yeah, so a simple fish heart is 1 in, 1 out. And it can't produce a whole lot of blood pressure. Let's see. Excuse me, blood pressure is relatively high, but by the time it gets to the rest of the tissue, it's basically zero. Distal means further away from the center of the organism. Proximal would be closer. What category of animal has more chambers than that, but fewer than a human? Anybody? Bueller? Dogs are mammals, and I'm pretty sure have 4. Somewhere between fish and dogs, we have tetrapods that are a little more different. Many reptiles, not all. Also mammal. Giraffe is also a mammal. So amphibians and reptiles have 3 chambers, basically the evolution of a second atria. So deoxygenated blood from the body is pumped via the right atrium to the lungs. That's your pulmonary circuit, and passing through the capillaries, blood loses pressure. However, as the oxygenated blood is returned to the left atrium, it's pumped out to the rest of the body. So by creating that closed pulmonary circuit, it's increasing a lot of efficiency. And then the work of the heart, the work of that one ventricle is still doing all of the work of supplying the pulmonary circuit and supplying the rest of the body. So it's more efficient because you have that, at least that one circuit, but it's not as efficient as the four-chambered heart. So then we get into bird. And we have basically 2 hearts, which is kind of cool. And that again is that right and left side. How are we doing on time? 4:47. Mm. Cool. As a result, higher levels of oxygen can be delivered per unit time, and a higher level of metabolism can be maintained. Cool. Both reptiles and mammals obtain their energy via aerobic respiration. Glucose is oxidized, etc. Both also need to be able to maintain internal homeostasis in order to survive. Given this, would you expect the lungs of the lizard, an ectotherm, to have more or less alveoli per unit area than the lungs of the rat, an endotherm? Assume that the overall surface area to volume ratios of the rat and the lizard are about the same, and explain the physiological reasoning behind your answer. Any thoughts? So the alveoli are the little grape-like structures in your lungs that facilitate diffusion of oxygen into the blood from your lungs. So ventilation, air goes in, air goes out. Respiration, gas diffusing across a membrane. You would be correct. So the lizard would have fewer alveoli per unit area of lung tissue than the rat. But why? On average, the ectothermic lizard requires less energy per unit time than the rat. So similar to humans, the rat's normal body temperature is generally higher and higher than the environmental temperature. Its enzymes are functional at this higher temperature. So maintaining the higher body temperature requires higher levels of cellular respiration, and as a result, higher levels of oxygen and food intake. So the rat must maintain a temperature higher than the environment to achieve homeostasis. This means higher energy, more need for oxygen, therefore more alveoli. Cool. On average, would you expect the heart rate of the lizard to be higher or lower than the heart rate of the rat? Same argument. Higher metabolic rate in the rat, lower metabolic rate in the lizard, because its temperature is closer to that of its environment. Rat's heart has to pump a lot faster to maintain that metabolism. So, same. Right, exactly. Cool. Question 4. Based on your knowledge of surface area to volume ratios, metabolic rates, and cardiopulmonary physiology, would you expect the following to be higher or lower for a human infant as compared to an adult? Explain the physiological reasoning behind your answer. So is body temperature higher or lower in infants? Let me rephrase the question. Yeah, would body temperature be high in an adult or in an infant relative to the other? To volume. So if body temperature is lost across surface area, is the adult's temperature lower? Infants have a temp of 38 C, so I think they're higher. Interesting. Interesting. So if we just looked at surface area, right? I have a lot more surface area than an infant. And if we're just looking at that, then I have a lot more area to be losing heat from. But I also have more heat, more energy to begin with because of my volume. And that ratio is the key component here. So because body temperature is lost across surface area, and because the infant has a much higher surface area to volume ratio than an adult, the infant will tend to lose heat much more rapidly than the adult. So, right, exactly. Volume is less than baby per surface area. How about heart rate? Heart rate tends to be pretty high in infants. And again, it's because of this ratio. Higher energy demands because of that increased surface area to volume ratio. Oxygen consumption rate per unit mass of body. So to maintain a constant temperature, infants are going to require that high metabolic rate we talked about. So as a result, both the heart rate and oxygen consumption rate per unit mass of body will be higher in the infant than in the adult. And this is why most infants weighing less than 20 require 9 calories a day. If did calories at this rate, a 100-pound human would require 1,000 calories per day. Yeah, much higher infants. So, here, but a couple quick true-false questions. Rest, an average human's blood pressure is 120/80. A person increases their activity. However, a variety of physiological modifications must be made to support the increased activity. For example, assume you're late for an exam and run 4 blocks. Which of the following would occur during your 4-block run? Indicate whether the following is true or false. Explain your reasoning. As will require more oxygen per time than when walking. You're moving faster, metabolic needs more oxygen. Blood will increase and your blood pH will increase. This is a tricky one. So this one's false. It's true. It does need more oxygen, but it's true that there's a higher level of carbon dioxide in the blood, but a higher level of carbon dioxide will produce higher levels of carbonic acid, which will reduce the blood pH. So low pH means higher acidity. Yeah. So this is the PONS. Your brain that is responsible for maintaining respirations, like your breathing rate, it measures the acidity in your blood to trigger relaxation of the muscles that control your diaphragm, and lung expansion and contraction, which is just a cool thing. So by measuring the acidity in your blood, there's more ventilations, which increase respiratory rate due to physical exercise. So more CO2 means more acidic, means lower pH, means greater metabolic. Opposite. So it is negative, but it's sending a signal to bring in more oxygen to adjust the acidity of the blood. More oxygen is going to increase the acidity, increase the pH. Equilibrium. Question 7. Why all of the acronyms? Mean arterial blood pressure will increase because both the heart rate and stroke volume. This is true. To increase the rate of delivery of both food and oxygen to the muscles, both heart rate and stroke volume will increase. So not only are you going to be moving blood faster, your heart is going to be taking in more of it to move more per stroke. That's that stroke volume. Cool. True. False. All right. Last one. Refer to the dissociation curves for two mammalian hemoglobins to answer the following question. I do want to do this one because I remember this being an exam question, so ding, 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 pay attention here. So we've got percent saturation of mammalian hemoglobins to partial pressure of oxygen or oxygen tension. True or false? At oxygen tension T0, both hemoglobins have released most of their oxygen. Keyword here is released. On our vertical axis, we've got percent saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen. So a low percentage of saturation means there's not much oxygen on there. So if at oxygen tension T0 times 0, yeah, both hemoglobins have released most of their oxygen, that is true because there's not a lot of oxygen on there to begin with. The percent saturation of both hemoglobins is near zero on the graph. At oxygen tension T1, over here, hemoglobin B is carrying less oxygen, so this is B. True or false, hemoglobin B is carrying less oxygen than hemoglobin A. That one is false. B is greater than A. And question 10, if a comparison of curves A and B illustrates the Bohr effect on a single species, then curve B represents the dissociation at the higher concentration of carbon dioxide or lower pH. If comparison of curves A and B illustrate the Bohr effect in a single species, then curve B represents the dissociation at the higher concentration of carbon dioxide. So this is false. Higher carbon dioxide levels lower the pH. You would expect the hemoglobin to release more of its oxygen to the active tissues, and therefore curve A is probably a better representation of what happens under low pH. So false. Increased activity increases CO2. Yeah. Higher carbon dioxide levels at lower pH, you expect hemoglobin to release more of its oxygen. Okay. Last one. In addition to carbon dioxide, contracting muscle cells produce a large amount of heat energy. It's been demonstrated that an increase in temperature, independent of carbon dioxide levels, encourages the blood to give up its oxygen to exercising tissues. Given this information, would you expect A or B below to be true? Explain your answer. Curve A from the previous page. Curve A would be the lower temperature curve, and B would be the higher temperature curve. Or option B, curve B would be the lower temperature curve, and A would be the higher temperature curve. The choice is curve B. Again, in comparison, curve A releases more of its oxygen at the same partial pressure of oxygen compared to curve B. So when you get these exam questions, read what they're asking for very, very, very carefully. In this last question here, notice what's going up and down in muscle tissue related to temperature, related to high temperature. Often to be really confusing. Sometimes it's just tough to keep track of. So if you need to, jot in the margins or take notes, underline the things that they're asking for, and the data that you actually need to reference in the chart so that you can kind of just keep things straight. Would be my advice to you. So that's everything I have for you guys. I gotta go study for my own midterms. So good luck to you all. Hope it goes well. Take care of yourselves. It is okay to take breaks during this. And I'll see you all next week. Don't forget to turn in your worksheets for that sweet extra credit. All right. See you next week.